Welcome, 8th graders, to this explainer. Have you ever watched the news during hurricane season and just wondered? Wondered how a simple little rainstorm manages to transform into this absolute swirling giant that we can literally see from space? Well, today we're breaking down the exact science behind the genesis and mechanics of tropical cyclones. So get ready because it's going to be a pretty fascinating ride. Let's dive right into this with a massive question, one that scientists have actually been studying for decades. What exactly acts as the engine for the biggest, most powerful storms on our planet? I mean, it isn't just wind, right? And it isn't just clouds. There's a very specific, incredibly powerful fuel source that kicks this entire process into high gear. And honestly, understanding it is the key to understanding everything else about tropical cyclones. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the anatomy of a cyclone, then go from wave to hurricane, head inside the storm, look at preparation and purpose, and finally wrap up with morality and education. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Anatomy of a Cyclone, the building blocks of a storm. Now, before we look at the physics of it all, the source material actually pauses to reflect on Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 13. It's this beautiful scripture describing the sheer majesty of the wind and rain. It really just serves as a reminder that these storms are viewed as part of a much grander, magnificent design. It kind of shows us that the raw power of nature is truly something to behold and respect. Okay, so getting into the mechanics, the absolute critical trigger for these storms is 26.5 degrees Celsius, or exactly 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Picture this. The sun beats down on the ocean, heating it right up. And when the surface hits that magic number, huge amounts of warm water evaporate into moist air. Let me tell you, without this immense heat evaporating up into the atmosphere, the storm engines simply will not start. Heat is literally the fuel for the whole shebang. So as all that warm, moist air rapidly rises up, it leaves this area of low pressure down near the surface. To fill that gap, cooler, higher pressure air from the surrounding areas just rushes right in. But here's the catch. Because the Earth is constantly rotating, that rushing air begins to spin like a giant top. This twisting motion is known as the Coriolis effect. It's exactly what gives cyclones their signature, terrifying, swirling shape. Moving right along to Section 2. From wave to hurricane, the life cycle of a cyclone. Just like a plant grows from a tiny seed, a storm grows in very distinct stages. It usually starts out pretty simply as a tropical wave. But as it gathers that warm water we talked about and really begins spinning, it organizes into a tropical depression. If it keeps growing, boom, it becomes a named tropical storm. And finally, if all the conditions are just right, it matures into a full-blown hurricane. It's crazy to think a small wave off the coast of South America can slowly organize and grow all the way into a massive Category 3 storm. But here's the thing. A system only earns the official heavyweight title of a hurricane once its sustained winds hit exactly 74 miles per hour. That is the absolute threshold. Anything less than that, it stays a tropical storm. But the very second those spinning winds cross that 74-mile-per-hour mark, oh boy, warning systems kick into their highest gears. Now, a lot of people wonder, what's the actual difference between a hurricane and a typhoon? The answer? Absolutely nothing scientifically. I mean it. These two famous weather terms describe the exact same mechanical phenomenon. They're the exact same spinning storms, fueled by the exact same warm water. They're just happening in different geographic zip codes. It's really simply a matter of where on the map you happen to live. To put this whole process into perspective, the warm waters off the coast of Africa actually act as a massive nursery. They spawn these incredibly powerful storm systems that literally cross the entire Atlantic Ocean over a week or two. They just gather strength that whole way across before finally making landfall and impacting North America. It perfectly shows how deeply connected our entire global weather system truly is. But hey, remember our magic number from earlier? 80 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Conversely, when ocean temperatures drop, like during a weather pattern known as La Niña, storm formation slows way, way down. Without that 80-degree water, that essential heat ingredient is completely missing. It's honestly like trying to drive a car with a totally empty gas tank. Cool waters mean no evaporation, no rising moist air, and ultimately no storm engine whatsoever. Which brings us to Section 3, Inside the Storm, Exploring the Center. It's really one of nature's greatest ironies that right in the dead middle of all that chaos, all that destruction and howling wind, sits a pocket of eerie, totally undisturbed calm. We call it the eye.
If you were somehow standing right in the eye of a hurricane, the winds would just suddenly die down, the rain would stop entirely, and you might even look up and see clear blue sky or stars. It is a stunningly calm, low-pressure center.
However, do not let that calm fool you for a second, because immediately surrounding that peaceful center is a dense, terrifying ring of towering thunderstorms. We call this the eye wall. And this is where the absolute worst of the storm's fury is unleashed. If you're in the path of the eye wall, you are experiencing the most intense, destructive winds and the absolute heaviest rainfall the cyclone has to offer. It's hands down the most violent part of the entire system. All right, let's look at Section 4, Preparation and Purpose, Responding to the Forces of Nature. So why do we study all of this? Well, because these storms, while they are a natural part of the Earth's water cycle, bring some truly devastating hazards right to our shores. We're talking about extreme wind damage, massive storm surges that literally push the ocean up onto land, and really severe flooding. But by utilizing our scientific knowledge of exactly how these storms work, we can mandate building codes that keep our homes intact, and we can create solid emergency evacuation plans. Simply put, this scientific knowledge directly saves lives. And studying this also provides some pretty profound perspective. The material emphasizes that this really blends rigorous scientific preparation with a deep respect for God's power. It teaches that while God controls these absolutely incredible forces of nature, humanity is granted the intellect and the wisdom to understand them, to track them, and to respond safely. And that brings us perfectly to our final section, Section 5, Morality and Education, the HeroesMart philosophy. The HeroesMart Academy curriculum actually connects these scientific principles directly to the Godly Learners series. Their core philosophy is that gathering all these scientific facts, like knowing the exact temperature a hurricane forms at, is essentially useless if we don't have the moral compass to use that knowledge wisely. They argue that education without a solid foundation of biblical morality just doesn't make us better. In fact, unchecked knowledge can ultimately lead to decisions that hurt both ourselves and the people around us. Think about it like this. What is the point of being the absolute smartest person in the room, of having straight A's across the board, if you just continue to make life choices that cause pain to your community? Just like a well-built house needs a deeply solid foundation to survive a hurricane, this curriculum suggests your education needs a solid moral foundation. Otherwise, you might just collapse under the heavy pressures of life. To really support this idea, the text points us right to Romans chapter 8. By keeping the mind spiritually grounded, it promises true peace, literally stating that to be spiritually minded is life and peace. The big takeaway here is that when you align a really sharp, educated mind with a spiritually grounded heart, you find a kind of peace that absolutely no storm can shake. So as we wrap up this explainer, the curriculum leaves you, 8th graders, with one final big thought. We've seen exactly how cyclones form, and we know how we must physically prepare for them. But as you face the literal and figurative storms of your own life, how are you going to face them? Will you face them armed with just facts? Or will you weather them with both a well-prepared, highly educated mind and a deeply spiritually grounded heart? Keep learning, keep seeking wisdom, and I will catch you all in the next explainer.